Disagreements at work, they're pretty much inevitable, right? But what's the absolute best way to solve them? And maybe more importantly, does that answer change when your team is scattered all over the globe? Well, today we're going to dig into a really fascinating study that compares 4 different countries to find out exactly that. So let's start with just one number, 20%. Now what's that? Get this, it's the amount of a manager's time that's spent just dealing with conflict. That's 1 full day out of every single week. It's a massive drain on productivity, for sure, but the real cost, well, it goes way beyond just lost time. You see, the human cost is actually much, much higher. As this research points out, when conflict isn't handled well, it can create these really toxic environments full of anger and hostility. That leads directly to higher stress and real psychological harm for your team. So getting this right isn't just about good management, it's absolutely essential for people's well-being. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll look a little closer at that 20% problem. Then, we'll unpack 5 common tactics managers use. After that, we'll dive into the big question of culture, reveal the study's kind of surprising verdict, and finally, we'll put it all together into a global playbook you can actually use. Okay, so when a manager has to step in and play referee, they have what you might call a conflict resolution toolkit. Researchers have basically identified 5 common tools or tactics that managers tend to use. Let's open up that toolkit and take a look at each one. First up is advising, which you probably know as mediation. Here, the manager isn't a judge, they're more of a facilitator, a guide. They help the conversation along, but, and this is the crucial part, the employees themselves have to be the ones to find and agree on their own solution. Next, we have the adversarial tactic. Think of this one like arbitration. The manager basically acts like a judge in a courtroom. Each person gets to present their side of the story, their case, and then the manager makes the final binding decision. Case closed. Third is the autocratic approach. With this one, the manager takes complete control of, well, everything, both the process and the outcome. They run the discussion, they decide what solution to go with, and then they enforce it. The study actually notes this is a really common tactic. Number 4 is called providing impetus, but you gotta love its nickname, the kick in the pants. Here, the manager doesn't want to get bogged down in the details. They just provide a really strong incentive, maybe an order, maybe even a threat, for the employees to just solve the problem themselves and fast. And finally, there's avoidance. Now, this is a conscious choice. The manager sees the conflict, they know it's happening, but they make the decision to do absolutely nothing, hoping, maybe praying, that the employees will just figure it out on their own. So there you have it, our 5 tactics. But this brings us right to the heart of the matter, the core question of this whole study. Do people all around the world react to these tactics the same way? Is what one person considers fair truly universal? To figure this out, the researchers used a classic cultural framework, individualism versus collectivism. It really boils down to this. Individualistic cultures tend to focus on the I, personal goals, individual rights. Collectivistic cultures focus on the we, what's best for the group, maintaining harmony. And as you can imagine, this difference could have a huge impact on what people think a fair resolution looks like. So here was the setup. The researchers gave a conflict scenario to students in 3 more collectivistic countries. That's Argentina, the Dominican Republic, and Mexico. And one highly individualistic one, the US. Now, what do you think they found? Did culture predict what people wanted? Let's take a look. All right, it is time for the big reveal. The data showed some things we might have expected, yeah, but it also turned up some genuine surprises that really challenge our assumptions about how culture and conflict work together. So if you average the results across all 4 countries, a really clear pattern emerges. Advising, that collaborative mediation approach, was the universal favorite, number 1. And right behind it was the decisive autocratic tactic. And at the bottom, the least favorite by a long shot, providing impetus and avoidance. The message here is crystal clear. People want their managers to be involved, not checked out. But, and this is a big but, it gets way more complicated when you break it down by country. Take a look at the rating for the super-controlling autocratic tactic. In the Dominican Republic, it was seen as very fair, scoring over 73. But in Argentina, it scored a much, much lower 51. This just goes to show that even within so-called collectivistic cultures, ideas about fairness can be wildly different. And we see the same thing again with advising. I mean, while everybody liked it, participants in the US rated it as significantly more fair than the folks in Argentina did. So what's the takeaway here? It's that even a universally liked approach is still viewed through a very specific cultural lens. And here's a fun little curveball that researchers ran into. They had predicted that people would want different tactics depending on if the conflict was with a close friend versus just a coworker, but it had no effect at all. And the likely reason is pretty cool. Just being on the same work team was already enough to create a strong in-group feeling, which made that whole friend-coworker distinction totally irrelevant. Okay, so what in the world does all this mean for you, for a manager who might be leading a global team? Let's take all these fascinating findings and turn them into a practical, actionable playbook. Here it is, your 4-step playbook for cross-cultural conflict. The biggest key is to be flexible. First, know all 5 of your options so you can go beyond whatever your default tactic is. Second, try to prioritize participation. Advising is a pretty safe and powerful bet almost anywhere. Third, and this is a big one, beware of neglect. People everywhere seem to dislike avoidance and providing impetus. And finally, remember that context is king. What works wonders in one country might totally backfire in another. As our teams get more and more global, these cross-cultural misunderstandings, they're just going to happen. So we'll leave you with this question to think about. In this new world of work with remote teams and global collaboration, what is the single most important conflict skill that every single leader needs to master?